I'm Julianna Forlano. You're watching Act TV. The economic impact of the pandemic is growing, obviously, and people are concerned. According to our next guest, Dean Baker, it seems increasingly likely that we're going to be looking at a horrible and prolonged recession, not a complete economic collapse, which would be better. A recession is better than collapse, right? He's here to give us his recommendations for economic stimulus that helps the most vulnerable of society as opposed to the big corporations and CEOs we see being held right now. Baker is the co-founder of the Center for Economic and Policy Research. His areas of research include housing and macroeconomics, intellectual property, social security, Medicare and European labor markets. He's the author of several books, including Rigged, How Globalization and the Rules of the Modern Economy Were Structured to Make the Rich Richer. His blog, Beat the Press, don't miss it. It's fabulous. Gives you commentary on economic reporting because guess what? If you're watching economic reporting in the mainstream, you're getting a little bit of a story, shall we say. Dean, welcome to the program. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me on.
So talk about what we're seeing right now in terms of, economic numbers. Are we looking at a recession, a depression, or something else?
Well, we're looking, I think, at a very, very bad recession. So there are a number of concerns that, we had this shutdown period into May, varying by that this would just wipe out the economy, and we'd be looking at depression levels of unemployment, say 25%, at the peak of the depression. And what we're seeing is a really, really bad story. I want to be clear. We're talking about a really bad story, but I think better than that. There's a lot of sectors of the economy that are doing okay. People bought a lot of cars in May, so you had people that were still on payroll, they working from home or, getting paid even for not working in some cases. But, they have money in the bank. They got $1,200 checks from the government. They have money in the bank. A lot of those people went out and bought a car in May, and it seems like they're doing that again in June. Another measure that I was looking at, housing mortgages, mortgage applications. People are applying for mortgages. Yes, some are refinancing, which is good. I mean, that means people take advantage of a lower interest rate. If you have a $200,000, $300,000 mortgage and you could save 1 percentage point, which a lot of people could, that's $2,000 or $3,000 a year that you're saving. So that's a big deal. And then we have data on purchase mortgages. So these are mortgages associated with people buying a home. And that's actually higher than it was a year ago. So
I wonder if that's an economic issue or basically what I'm seeing is flight from the cities.
I think it's both. And, so of what we're seeing, I think, is a short-term story. Okay, here we had this shutdown. It's still, still a lot of areas are shut down. And of course, a lot of people don't feel comfortable going to a restaurant, getting their hair cut. A lot of things, we know are still not safe, certainly in many parts of the country. So people aren't doing them. So that's a short-term issue. A longer-term story, and I think we're seeing the beginnings of it, is that a lot of people are saying, well, guess what? I could telecommute. So I don't have to live in New York City where it's crowded and the rents are real high. And yep. And so, so I think we're seeing the beginnings of that. I mean, one of the measures, it's just 1 month, and I'm always cautious. 1 month's data, things jump around. But one of the measures I thought was very interesting this way, we got data for let's see, it would have been May it was May. I'm sorry, should know this offhand. It was May data on commercial rents, and those showed a big fall, like a 2.5 percentage point 1 month drop. That's a big deal. Again, 1 month, you always have to say, you never know, things could be erratic. But that's consistent with the story of a lot of businesses saying, hey, I don't need this much office space. I had all this office space in a prime location, and my workers are working remotely. They come in once a week. Maybe they don't come in at all. I don't need this much office space. So to my view, that's going to be a longer term story. And
WeWork is actually going to come back because people are only going to need to do meetings once a week, right? I mean, this could be good for them.
I think we're going to see a lot of people, moving at least further away. If you suppose your job's in New York City, you come in once a week. Well, if you're coming in every day, you don't want an hour and a half, 2 hour commute. You'd go nuts. But on the other hand, if it's once a week and maybe it's not even at rush hour, so you could come in for your meeting at 11 o'clock and get out of there at 1 o'clock. 2 hours might not be a bad deal. So I think we will see that, and I think that's actually a really, really good thing. But I think we're going to see the beginning of that.
You talk about consumption declining across socioeconomic divides. Why is that important?
Well, it's striking here because the big fall off in consumption is in the top quintile. There's very good research by Rod Shetty at Harvard where he's gotten data, like we use the term time. So this means, that he's getting data, business reporting from business sources rather than the government, which they could get more quickly. And what he's finding is that if you look at who has a big fall off in their consumption, it's the top quintile. So what's happening is most people are pretty much consuming as much as they did before, at least insofar as they're able, partly because there's not a lot of room. So, you take someone who's earning 40,000 a year, say a 200 couple, they don't have a lot of room to go down. They're paying their rent, they're paying their food, their other necessities. It's not like they really have an option to go down. I mean, get evicted from their apartment, but, assuming that doesn't happen, they don't have a lot of room. If you get to the higher end, people earning 100, 150, 200,000 a year, and of course higher than that in some cases, money on things like restaurants, a gym membership, they see you go to the haircut, beauty salon, whatever. These are things that they're not doing. And one of the interesting things in the Chetty work was they found that that was pretty much independent. Services were legal, whether they were still blacked out or not, so we had the shutdowns. And in cases where you didn't have the shutdown, there was as much of a fall off as in areas where they did. So it wasn't just that, the big bad government was telling you.
Why do you think that is?
Well, people are scared, so these are people, it's an optional activity. So, it's one of these things, we've had a lot of talk about essential workers. So, you're working at the grocery store. Obviously, these tend to be lower wage earners. Mostly, you're not getting a big paycheck to work at the grocery store. Those people, you have to work. You go in there, it's not a choice. You have to work. You need your paycheck, this and that. Okay. But on the other hand, if you're a higher end person, you're going, well, do I want to take the risk of going to a restaurant? Well, a lot of people are saying no, so they're not doing it. So the issue here then, just drives it home. We have to make people safe. That's really front and center, and that's been the enormous failing of the response to the pandemic. Obviously it's different in some places. New York's done a way better job than where I am out here in Utah or Arizona, just over the border here. Ours have been soaring. New York's have plummeted. So deserve a lot of credit, they made a lot of mistakes too, but they did bring it down. Cuomo and de Blasio brought it down. Others, it's going up. It's at highs, record highs.
Absolutely. We're speaking with Dean Baker, senior economist for the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Dean, what are your recommendations for the next economic stimulus based on what we're seeing right now? And I'd also like to get your thoughts on the CARES Act, which I've heard called the largest transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top and large corporations that has ever occurred in the history of the United States and possibly the world.
Well, first off, in terms of the next stimulus, it has to be focused on the people who need it most.
We say that for every stimulus. They never do that.
Well, they didn't do that bad in the CARES Act. I'll come back to that in a second. But
okay.
What we need to do, if we're giving out money to people, it should be the people who are unemployed. I mean, that shouldn't be a tough one. Also people, food stamps. We should increase food stamp payments because there are people who need it. And guess what? The price of food's gone up a lot. So even though people aren't shopping at restaurants, where are they doing? They're shopping at grocery stores. That leads to higher food prices. Surprise, surprise. So those are people that really need it badly. And with unemployment insurance, it's kind of, we had this supplement, which is very good. I'll come back to that in a second. But we had this supplement, $600 a week for unemployed workers, and that's helped a huge amount. And there's a lot of talk about getting rid of that. And the point I've made, I wrote a short piece on this last week, that we gave that because we didn't want people to work. So now there's this argument, oh, we need them to go back to work. Well, some places that might go in New York, maybe you'd say that, but in where I am in Utah, in Arizona, in Texas, we're seeing higher infection rates than ever. So if we didn't want people to work in April and May, why do we want them to work now when the infection rates are higher than ever? So I'd say, yeah, keep the supplements, whether it's 600, you could reduce it, maybe 400 is the right number. I mean, you could argue over that, but we shouldn't be saying, oh, we have to get people back to work. The other really big point, state and local governments across the country have just been whacked. They've seen their revenues plummet. demand for services because of the pandemic has gone through the roof. They have massive budget deficits almost everywhere, probably everywhere. They need money immediately, and if they don't get it, we're going to see massive layoffs. Again, we did some research on this. One of the things that's striking is if you look at state and local workers, disproportionately they're Black. Blacks are hugely overrepresented, about 20% overrepresented. Obvious reason. They're nation against Blacks in state and local government than in the private sector. So historically, it's been a source of good paying jobs for Black workers. So as we're sitting here, how can we eliminate the effects of racism? Really simple thing. Let's not make it worse. So let's get the money to state and local governments so they don't have to have massive layoffs of Black workers. So those are my two things. Let's extend unemployment, I guess three things: increase the food stamp payments, and then also money to state and local governments. Now, you asked me about the CARES Act. I think it's very much a big bag. So, the unemployment insurance, $600, we kept people who are unemployed pretty much whole. Now, people slip through the cracks. The largest group of those are undocumented workers. That is a really, really big problem because obviously we have a lot of undocumented workers. But for most of the workforce, that was a pretty good way to keep them whole. Now, we gave the $1,200 pandemic checks. I got one. I still have my job. I was happy. Actually, we gave it away, but I was happy to get it. But come on, I didn't need it. There was no real justification. I don't know what that was supposed to accomplish.
Buy you off. It had Trump's name on it. There was like a small
that
rider that said, "This is in exchange for your soul."
that made my day. Now, in terms of the upward redistribution, I guess that concerns me a little less than it does other people because it was kind of a disaster situation, and I contrast this with the bailout in 2009 because I was about the biggest opponent of that. I said, let these banks fail. And my logic there was twofold. One is they brought it on themselves, so they were to blame. The fact that Citigroup and Goldman, the others would have gone bankrupt, they were to blame for that. So let them enjoy the fruits of their labor. Let them go, and I'm not just being vindictive. This is a huge source of waste in the economy. We don't need these people developing complex financial instruments to play games. So they did this, blew themselves up. Good. We don't need you. Now, would that have been bad for the economy? The immediate downturn would have been worse, but we could counter that. We know how to counter that. 2, 3, 4 months of probably. But I think we'd get an enormous benefit by getting rid of this cost on the economy. Now, if we look at the current situation, I'm not going to cry tears for the airline CEOs and their shareholders and, the other industries. But the reality is they didn't bring this on themselves. So if we had massive bankruptcies, that would be a problem for right. I really, as much as I'd be happy to kick the CEOs in the face who are getting $20 million a year, it's been good to have massive bankruptcies right now. So my view is it wasn't a horrible thing. I'm not happy about it. I wish we could put more conditions on it. But if the alternative A, let them all go bankrupt. Alternative B, do what we did. And I'd go with alternative B. Now, what I'd like to say is, and I've written on this, let's give these guys a nice little special tax. How about a 10 percentage point excess profits tax? Or I shouldn't say excess profits. We'll just tax your profits, period. In fact, I tied to stock returns, make it simple.
That's a great idea. If they get, what a good idea that is. I don't understand why it was a there were very few conditions. Was there? Isn't that
there accurate? Were very few. And I think, the Democratic leadership did a horrible job negotiating because, okay, I understand the Republicans control the Senate. I understand this. And you had Trump at the end of the day, but they understood Trump wants to get reelected. You have a lot of Republicans up for reelection. They don't want to see the economy literally fall to pieces. So Pelosi could conditions. And if this were public, you go, hey, the conditions are your CEO's not going to get 20 million. Your CEO's going to get 2 million. You're not going to make dividend payments or buybacks to shareholders. We're all suffering. So that's going to be how they'll suffer.
I mean, it's crazy that the idea is that stimulus packages are the only things that we can do. How about we make sure, get these offshore accounts back onshore and tax them? That would fix a lot of stuff, and then take that tax money and give that away to people so they can spend it. Are there other ways beside the one I just came up with as a non-economist off the top of my head that could solve some of these issues?
Well, again, I think we have to separate short-term and long-term. So short-term, we faced an immediate crisis that you had We were literally shutting down the economy. It was illegal to work in many lines of business from the middle of March well into May. So we had to deal with that there. It's hard to talk about big structural changes when you have to make sure people get a check next week. So there was a need to do, whether you call it stimulus, rescue package, I prefer the term rescue, but whatever, that had to be done immediately. But longer term, guys have been running around like bandits. I mean, one of the things, a less publicized aspect of the tax cut, the corporate tax cut that Trump pushed through, he said, okay, we're going to cut the rates, but we're going to get rid of the loopholes. And I've looked at this, others have as well. Guess what? The loopholes are still there. So, if you look previously, we had a 35% tax rate, but what they actually paid was, I don't know, 22, 23. It varied a little bit. So there was some argument to say, okay, what's the point in having a 35% tax rate if you're only getting 22%? Why not have a 22% tax rate and actually get 22? That would make sense. So we lowered the rate to 21%, but now percent. So yeah, I mean, we should set a corporate tax rate and actually get it. There are ways to do it. I've written on this. If we just tied it to stock returns, we get it. There's no way around that. For whatever reason, there's not a lot of interest in that. I can think of why there's no reason.
I can't imagine.
Interest. But that's kind of foolproof. If you just tie it to the stock returns, unless they rip off their shareholders, in which case they're probably in some trouble with their shareholders, you could be sure you're getting the money.
You wrote that large numbers of workers are likely to be displaced even after the immediate impact of this pandemic is over. What do we make of that? How can we adjust to this new reality? And is everyone in fear of their job?
Well, I don't think everyone has to be in fear of their jobs, but there are lots of jobs. So as long as people are scared to go to restaurants, we're going to see a big fall off in restaurant demand. Now, I'm assuming, 6 months, a year out, I don't know, we'll have the pandemic more or less under control, either by effective treatments or by a vaccine, maybe both, who knows. But, at that point, people feel comfortable going to restaurants and gyms, the things that people used to do and they're not doing now. But part of that story is that, as I was saying before, if we have a lot more telecommuting, well, we had a lot of people working who were servicing the people who were coming into work at those office buildings. So all the people in New York City that, were going to these office buildings, a lot of them went out to eat for lunch. A lot of them went to gyms, after work, before work, or at lunch. They did other things down there. Well, if they're not there, so if the number of people coming into downtown Manhattan is, cut by 50%, there's a lot of people who are servicing those people that those jobs are gone. So that is a really big problem. And, it's a problem for those people, of course, and we have to make sure that they're kept whole. But it's also an opportunity in the sense that we know we have lots of unmet needs. We need childcare, we need healthcare, we need to do something about the climate. We need to install solar paneling to energy efficient windows, insulation, all these things, long list of things that we know we need. So what I would hope, obviously this won't happen in Trump administration, but we could hope it would happen in Biden administration, a massive commitment to addressing these unmet needs that would reemploy these displaced workers. Because, there's no virtue in serving lunch to, Wall Street types, every day. There's no, I doubt many people really liked it. They need their paycheck,
Yeah.
But we can give them a paycheck to do something else.
We're speaking with Dean Baker, senior economist at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Dean, questions coming in from the chat here. Here's a comment from Quasi Spec. I follow the logic, I guess, but it still seems like propping up the financial sector to prevent second order effects from a demand shock is a little bonkers. At least in 2009, QE was propping up the financial sector to prevent financial sector uncertainty bleeding into the real economy. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not sure the exact question. So 2009, to my view, was bonkers. So I would have loved to just, tell Citigroup and Goldman Sachs, guess what? You guys like the market, enjoy the market, you're bankrupt. And we could have kept the system of payments in order. I mean, the idea that somehow we'd be sitting here and no one get cash from their ATM, I go, not in this country. We know how to do that,
Yeah.
So they really, there was a false story. I mean, I had a lot of debates with people about this, economist people, and they were just insisting, oh no, we wouldn't be able to do this. And go, how can we not do this? We've had this technology for 60 years. I mean, like, what are you telling me? It makes no sense. We have the FDIC, in other words. That's so. So I don't think that was the story in 09. Is that the story today? Well, it goes well beyond the financial system. It's everything, or maybe not everything, but I mean, very large sectors of the economy: hotels, car rentals, airlines, Boeing. I mean, the suppliers for Boeing. It's a long list, and they would all be bankrupt if we didn't come in with a rescue package. So again, I have no sympathy for the people earning big bucks at those places. The shareholders should understand the risk. They don't share their gains with us when unexpected event happens. If you take a loss, well, that's, if you didn't understand the investment, that's your problem. But
A
I
little
think
tough love might be okay.
would have been all our problem.
Dean, another question coming in from Touring News. What does the world, or when does the world turn on the US weaponizing modern monetary theory and quantitative easing? And do you foresee the yen, Chinese digital currency becoming an international trading currency in this decade?
Well, I don't really know. We've weaponized the modern monetary theory. I mean, we've taken advantage of the fact that we could print money, as have other countries, as had Japan. I don't know why we shouldn't. I don't think that harms anyone in the world. Now, one of the things that I think has happened, will continue to happen, is that the dollar will be less widely used as the currency, the medium of exchange. It's already, people do use yen, they use the euro. They don't use the Chinese currency much, really, as the choice of the Bank of China, because it's not a convertible currency. But that I expect to change over the years. And part of that, Trump has been so abusive in terms of, imposing sanctions on countries, saying you can't use the dollar. I mean, no one has done anything like that as Trump has. And really over often, basically his anger at, this or that leader. So I expect the world to move away from the dollar as the predominant reserve currency. But I don't see that as being a massive change. It's still going to be a major currency. It's not as though we're going to be sitting here with dollars. No one will want them. I think that's not a plausible story.
Thank you so much for coming on the program. We've been speaking with Dean Baker on this recession, the stimulus, and the recovery. Follow Dean on Twitter at DeanBaker13. Dean, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for having me on, Julianna.